Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Cut and Splice. This is Matt speaking.
This is Gil.
And this is Jason.
So, this time around, we're talking about the 2004 film Primer, directed by Shane Carruth. If I'm mispronouncing that, he can feel free to come around and punish me. But it's one of those weird movies that was made on a shoestring budget. It's science fiction. It's time travel. We've talked about time travel movies on this channel before, and this is one of those movies that managed to go from obscurity to having a certain level of cult following. Uh, I personally enjoy it, and I'll open up the floor. So, yeah, Gil, Jason, feel free to come in and support me, but you can also kick the shit out of me. So, go for it.
Um,
It's
yeah.
fascinated that's your go-to term. Anyway,
What's the go-to term? Which one?
nothing.
Which? Because
I
you
just
said several things there. I don't know what.
nothing.
um, I will say I was intrigued in doing this. Just mostly because my recollection of seeing this movie, which I think I only saw it once, was that it was very confusing and sort of in the I guess in the recent movie we did, Predestination, like too complicated for its own good type of thing is what I recalled.
Mhm.
And I wasn't incorrect revisiting it now. It's still overly complicated for its own good, but I I appreciated it more this time, I think, than before. So I do see more of the value in it, and I might have caught a couple of things that I didn't catch the first time. And I understand the necessity for the complexity in this because there wasn't much else. So in a way, the spectacle in the movie is almost the verbal jargon and nonsense that they speak throughout the whole thing, and how intricate it is. And I'm sure it makes sense to some degree with some sort of like scientific theories. But yes, but at the same time, it is a problem that's pretty much most of what this movie has to offer. Aside from having a very intricate approach to the time travel, um, sequence of events, and how things fall through once that begins. So yeah, I mean, I think I had a better appreciation for it this time. I have no idea what I would have rated it back then. And this time I probably would have given it like a 4 or 5 back then. I would inch it to like a 6 to 7 now.
Mhm.
Probably would stick to a 6. But there's no denying that. That all said, just the fact that it's was done at such a low budget with very little resources, but still being able to be captivating for the most part,
Mhm.
and not be too amateurish looking, even though it kind of did. Um, it works. Like just the fact that it works is kudos for them. For sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, I This is the second time I've ever seen the movie. I watched it one time back when we all lived together when Matt insisted that we needed to watch it. I
And he
I
insisted that we watch it now.
exactly. So it was a lot of deja vu. No, which is kind of appropriate for this movie.
Yeah.
No, I remember liking it a lot more than I thought I was going to, based on Matt's description of it when he first showed it to me. I remember thinking overall, like you just said, I also think it's a little convoluted, and doesn't need to be as convoluted as it is. But it's impressive that they were able to get it done for as little as they did. I'm curious about a few things that just if the story is as good as it really says it is, but I don't know. We can get into that later, but yeah, I like it. It's just I don't know if I'd recommend it to people unless unless I got a feel that they were looking for an indie film about time travel, or if they were filmmakers or critics or somebody like that who had never seen it and was someone who I thought would appreciate it for the fact that it costs probably less than 10 grand overall. um, and we're able to make a feature film out of it, barely a small feature film, but because of its super low budget nature, I think a lot of people would find it would kind of be turned off by it. Um, I think the beginning is the most is one of the most compelling parts. Like it really grabs you and kind of like they do a good job of getting your attention because they don't spend any time explaining anything. You're just kind of along for the ride until the moment happens when the real story starts. And that's impressive about it. But yeah, it's I guess I'd say there's a lot of things about this movie that if it didn't work out just right, I think the whole movie would kind of be a failure. But there's a lot of stuff that does work, and because of that, I give it like um, a not super enthusiastic 7. But just bear in mind that that's a 7, you know, for a movie that cost nothing. So that's impressive, you know.
I don't really want to give the movie a lot of points because of the constraints. Uh, I if you have been listening to me for the last like 10 years, you would be inundated with rhetoric of if you don't have the money to make the movie, then make some other kind of movie. It's don't throw yourself into a movie with a script that requires like $30 million and you only have 100,000. Just don't do it. It's a bad idea. Primer is a movie that is deeply flawed in its technical aspects. The first time that I saw it, I mean, again, the movie came out in 2004, so that was before HD streaming and Netflix, having everything available to you at a click and so on and so forth. So I was watching it on SD, and surely enough, yeah, I didn't realize that, you know, 30% of the movie was out of focus.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was a big thing this time. I was like, oh my goodness, what's going on with it? The funny thing is that we watched the first half of the movie on the projector on 120 inch, and then for the second half, because it was like an off night or something, we had to do it quickly. We watched the second half on the TV, and it looked better on the TV. Less things looked out of focus. The projector really yeah, didn't help it.
Yeah. Um, that said, I mean, as a technician, you have to uh, have a certain amount of reverence for the fact that this movie is like 77 minutes long and they only shot 88 minutes worth of film. It was deliberate and they really designed every single shot before they even rolled the camera. And when you actually, I really do think that predestination was mentioned before, and I think that this is a healthy contrast to Predestination, and that Predestination was a movie that dealt almost entirely with a paradox when it comes to time travel. And this movie was one that tried to deal with time travel and not have a paradox. And that's rough. I mean, that's hard. Um, and I mean, I've tried to read a bit about the mindset behind the movie, and a lot of people have talked about how the voiceover probably comes from one of Aaron's um uh, clones or whatever. One of the future Aarons, just kind of talking through how everything's working. And actually, by the way, Gil, this kind of occurred to me that there's a little bit of reset in here.
Um,
Uh,
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
anything with like cloning or different versions of
yeah,
yourself.
and
For
I
all of
mean,
our listeners who have no idea,
Yeah.
Reset was an awesome master's thesis film that Gil made that all of us worked on. Uh,
And
I think
it's
there
available on
might be.
YouTube.
That's what I was just about to ask you.
Yeah.
So it is available on YouTube. Check it out now. Continue, Matt.
but yeah, I think that there's something there where this is there's something buried in the story of somebody who has the ability to live a past life with all the knowledge that comes with it. And he's basically just fuck. Uh, I think I just went into the spoiler area, but
It's okay. I can trim it if it's too spoilery.
Maybe we should just talk about spoilers.
Yeah. Maybe we should get there. But one thing I was gonna say, I think Jason is right about the recommendation part. Is the audience for this is definitely not a generic audience, not even a generic sci-fi audience. I think it's people that not even necessarily heavy sci-fi audience. I would actually heavy sci-fi, yes. Like if you're into heavy science fiction stuff that really delve into
yeah,
specific theories and aspects of science fiction, then you'll tolerate the amateurishness and the cheapness of the movie. Um, and then the other group would be people that are into very low budget indies and seeing how people are able to pull off something very cheaply, which tends to be more so just aspiring filmmakers. um,
okay, so if you've read more than 20 pages of Robert Heinlein, I rate this an 8.5. You need to see this. If you've read fewer than 20 pages of Robert Heinlein, I would probably rate this as like a 6.5, and you're gonna kick me in the face if you watch it. So, yeah,
so it's probably a 7.
yeah, it's like a 7. But
So there's 7.5.
yeah,
Um,
read Robert Heinlein, and then uh, come knocking at my door, and yeah. I mean, the thing is, Primer is one of those things that I think it cuts through a lot of what we've been talking about, in that it's it's high concept. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think about Interstellar. Like Interstellar. That was a mega budget movie. And one of the biggest problems with Interstellar is that it was kind of sort of convoluted. I mean, I showed that movie to people years after after the film was released, and they were just like, wait a minute. So time dilation, like zoopy zoopy zoo, so on and so forth. They didn't like that it wasn't just down to earth. And
Yeah.
Primer is like the mirror image of Interstellar in a lot of ways. I mean, it's a movie that, yeah, it hurts your brain. And I can't tell you exactly how all the rules work because no time travel movie is ever going to have clear and obvious rules in regard to how time travel works. At least when it comes to like uh, traveling into the past or anything like that. You're just never going to get that. It's just one of those movies that deals with time travel in a way that establishes rules. They follow the rules. The rules don't technically make sense in a few ways, but you know what? They managed to make a science fiction movie, and it's compelling and it's fun and it's mind bending and it makes us talk about it after we've seen it. And that is a freaking accomplishment.
I don't think Interstellar is even remotely confusing compared to this movie. In terms of its rules. And to be honest, I don't actually think that the rules of of the time travel are what's confusing in this movie. I think that it's they have a real like I kind of hinted at before. I really like the way the movie opens because they don't bother telling you a bunch of unnecessary stuff. You get to know what these four characters are doing and why. You don't even know what they're trying to build, but it doesn't matter because that's not what the movie's about. You only need to know how they get to the point where they stumble upon what they've created.
Yeah,
And they do that very, very well. And then from that point, the movie takes off and everything changes. The way that everything about what is being presented to you changes in a very good way. And then the movie jumps again when they discover just what they can do with what they've created, which is essentially time travel backwards. And they establish more or less how the machine works. I mean, obviously not like how it would actually work, but how the rules of the movie are going to work. And from there, kind of, I don't know if I'd say it's the second act, but at least the first half of the second act is pretty straightforward. And the rules all seem to work fine and everything's good. What I find convoluted isn't the rules. I find the story convoluted because at about a little beyond the halfway point of the second act and going well into the third act, it's like I'm not confused by the rules. I'm confused what on earth these guys are doing.
uh,
And I feel that way because I think one of the I don't know if I'd do anything different. Here's the weird part. Um, I think one of the strengths of the movie is that we're kind of along for the ride. And so that's how the movie manages to hide it manages to be convincing with a very low budget because it's about two guys experiencing this situation, and they're not doing anything crazy. They're not, they're not doing any grand, crazy time travel type stuff. Everything's just in their houses, storage sheds, a garage, various simple things. And they're just trying to figure out what on earth they're doing. They're going to these hotel rooms. They're kind of like making some money using their little time travel thing. And they're just they're like putting their toe in the water,
Yeah.
They're not doing that much. But then as we are following one guy, we start realizing that the other guy is doing more and so on and so forth. I'm not going to get into the details, but the point is, I think it's very.
We're in the
Yeah,
spoiler
we didn't
area.
No, no, no,
officially
no,
go
no,
into
no, no, no,
spoilers,
no,
but
no, no.
we
I'm
should.
not.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not going to go into it because of the spoilers. I'm saying there's no point in going into every single detail about the movie. All I'm trying to say is I find the manner in which the story is told to be one of the movie's strengths because it it manages to be a compelling story even without a lot of production value. And it
Yeah.
still makes it kind of compelling, even though there's not a lot of spectacle going on, other than my brain is telling me these guys are going back in time. So that's all good, but the side effect of that is that we're along for the ride. So aside from a little bit of narration from a recording that's confusing enough to begin with, we don't know, we're experiencing things as they are, so we're a little bit confused as they are. The guys are coming out of these machines groggy, they've got half information here and there, they're discovering just how crazy this stuff is going as they go along. We as the audience are too. And as a result, by the end, when things get really crazy, like at some point some guy is chasing them back in time, none of that's explained, like it's just wacky. It gets really interesting, and I'm not trying to say the movie's not good for any of this. It's just, it is convoluted, and I don't really think it's convoluted because of the rules. I just think the story gets convoluted.
Yeah.
Mm.
It also did bother me a bit, the level of of amateurishness of the movie, because I did appreciate that because they're trying to shoot at a very low ratio, that they're trying to do these oneers where they track along the scene or not do too much coverage, which works well some of the time, but other times it just felt like they just didn't know what they were doing with the camera really, and it kind of falls flat and hurts the movie. Um, but yes, it's the which is okay, because the like they always say about these indie movies, as long as you have good audio and a good story, people forgive bad camera work, lighting, things like
Yep.
that. And I think this is like the best example of that, probably, to show to like aspiring filmmakers. Because yes, I think Jason is correct. It gets too complicated, too convoluted. But it's also its strength, because there might have not been any other way to make this compelling, because the visuals were not compelling, and it fits the story, the fact that everything is so lo-fi, because it's these two guys building this on their own without the help of engineers and other people that can bring other materials. It's but still, it all feels like just part of the ploy of the movie is like, oh, everything is just kind of like handmade, it's tubes, and it's cheap. It takes away from what the movie can be. I do wonder what a movie like this could be if it was made as a major motion picture, but with a similar idea. But yeah, but I guess we can get into it. We should get into it. Maybe Matt should go into it. Like, what do you think was going on there that, maybe me and Jason found very convoluted at that halfway point? I mean, one thing I noticed, and maybe that could lead into it. One thing I noticed this time that I didn't notice probably the first time I watched it, is I realized later into the movie that in an earlier scene, when who's his face, the character of Abe, when Abe first reveals to Aaron when he's on the bench and he's coming to take him to with that terrible track from behind shot. That was one of those shots. It's like they should just not have done that. That just looks weird. But when he first comes to Aaron to reveal to him what he's discovered about the machine, Aaron has the earpiece. He's got the headphone piece, and I think the first time I saw this movie, I didn't get it, but this time I did. Is like because later on in the movie they have this whole thing with they have the earpiece where he's always like a few seconds ahead of the time, the current time, and I was like, oh, so Aaron was a time traveler before Abe was. He just didn't tell him. Like he was aware of it and he played along as if he wasn't aware of it. He was already doing the trick with the headpiece, and he was leading Abe all along. Whereas in the movie, it feels like Abe is one step ahead of him until you realize that he was doing the earpiece trick and you go back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I don't think I caught that the first time. I think the first time it was such a blur of a movie that I didn't remember the throwback, because they do a throwback scene to that scene. It was like, oh yeah, he had the earpiece both times, and the earpiece is something that a time traveler uses. So he was the first time traveler. Yeah, but it didn't help me understand the rest of the movie. So there's that.
I actually, this is if I were to ever engage with Shane Carruth and just say like, hey, I have a problem with your movie, it's going to be that Aaron and Abe both have names starting with A. Why don't you just say like, okay, you're Aaron and he's Brian.
Yeah.
Or something, and make it abundantly clear that you are two different people.
Well, it's nice that they picked two people that looked very different.
Yeah, but so much of the movie is in dialogue.
That's true.
So, Aaron, Abe. Yeah, like, okay, I'm well more than a decade removed from seeing this movie for the first time, and I still need to just double check. Okay, this is Aaron. This is Abe. This is Aaron. This is Abe. This is Aaron. This is Abe. Yeah, it's not fun. I'm Aaron. This is Brian. We're doing time travel together. Go for it. Audience, figure it out. That's not that hard. Also, by the way, Gil, I have to note that Aaron is the name of the actor in Reset. So,
yeah.
But
yeah.
Well, I don't want to get off topic, but before I forget, I wanted to mention that even after seeing this the first time, I've gone back and referenced this several times in conversations with people over and over. But one of the things I really like about this movie is just one of the scenes in the opening first act of the film, really, and they're just it's just four guys in a garage just talking about a bunch of stuff, and it's kind of sort of montagey. They're just sort of showing them working hard, trying to make money and trying to get patents and things like that. And the two main characters are sort of talking behind the other guys' backs about they're venting to each other about kind of not seeing eye to eye with things. And there's a really fantastic scene, dialogue scene, where one of them says to the other one, um, about the story about the space pen, right? Or something like that. And he says, yeah. He says NASA spent something like whatever millions of dollars developing a pen that will write in space. And he says, "Oh yeah." He says the Russians' solution was to bring a pencil up into space. And he used that as an example, saying that, like, I think our friend so and so can only see the NASA solution to things, and so that's why he's frustrated with him. But I just find that story very fascinating. I don't even know if it's true or not. I just think it's really good writing.
So I mean, Matt, you didn't really get into the what is your interpretation of what's going on in the midsection towards the ending of the movie between them?
That's rough.
I mean,
I
I can
think,
try to give my interpretation, and maybe you can fill in the gaps, or
go for it.
I didn't completely. I don't know if I formalized anything very specific, but from my understanding, it seems like Abe is established as the first traveler, but then is discovered later that Aaron was traveling before him. So they're, in a sense, playing this game with each other,
Yeah.
which would have been strange because then where's Aaron's machine? If Abe is the one that set up the machine and the public storage, then where's Aaron's machine? Who knows? And then they have a falling out of sorts because Aaron starts using it for other things, like getting back at his boss or something. I don't know, it was like punching in the face, or I don't know what it was, but something that's just gone beyond just not impacting the sequence of events and interacting with people, and mostly trying to make some money. Um, and then from the falling out, they kind of part ways. They essentially, and I guess, and then it seems like in the end that one of the clones or one version of him, because it seems like there's already a few of them out, that the this whole thing, of keeping the duplicating yourself again and again can backfire, because like maybe there's a certain delay or whatever that is, but that one version of Aaron that is out of the timeline, because there's another Aaron with the wife and everything. He can go wherever he wants. He goes off out of the country, I guess, to not be spotted by anybody. And it seems like at the end that he's gonna essentially build the machine in a more commercial way with some people that are helping him. And maybe that would be a bad thing, because he's sort of gotten addicted to the power of travel more so than Abe. Like Abe was able to maybe control his urges, and Aaron is just so far gone that he's a menace. But because there's so many of him, he could not be stopped in a way. Sort of like the Fizzle Bomber and stuff in Predestination.
Yeah.
my that's more or less what I got out of it. I do know that towards the end there's a very big focus placed on two things. One, they seem to have a sort of plan to go back and use their prior knowledge of things to stop something terrible that happened at a party involving one of their ex-girlfriends.
Yeah.
And it seems as though they were successful, but they don't really film the confrontation. They don't really show us the confrontation. So that also is a bit vague. And then also there's another part of that whole sequence, that whole portion of the film that gets a little confusing, because somebody who I thought it was the guy who they previously mentioned as their somebody who could be a financer for them, someone who could give them some money for startup. Because I think they said it was one of their significant others' fathers or something like that. I don't know. For some reason, somebody starts chasing them back through time, and they encounter the person, but then nothing really comes of that part of the story. So those are the two things that confused me the most. Was what on earth was going on with those two aspects of the story.
No, so can you repeat that again, just the last part? So
Me?
Yeah, so you're saying about the party, and then the two of them.
So there's once they establish that the two of them start going back in time, basically, and there's a really interesting scene that starts to show what Gil was just talking about, the difference between the two of them and how they're experiencing it, because it's a scene involving the wife. They ask her, like, what would you do if you had a bunch of money or something like that, and it shows in their faces how they're kind of reacting to this thing differently. But right around that scene, or that point, it starts. We've established that they're going back in time, and then it's almost as if they needed them to do something, like to be working towards a goal or something, because two things start happening. One is they hear about something that happened at a party from one of their exes or something like that, where one of that person's exes got violent, went out to his car, grabbed a shotgun, and walked into the party. Now, I don't know if he shot up a bunch of people or not, or if he did nothing. That part's unclear. All because it's all just something that's talked about. It's not something that's ever shown. And then they keep going back and back and back until the point where, like, they finally show them at the party, and they seem to have used the time travel machine to intervene and do something. But again, it's vague because it doesn't actually show them doing anything. So they kind of talk about it, and they show the guy walking in. They show them taking shotgun shells out of a car, out of the shotgun preemptively. So they did something with that, but again, it's very vague. And then the other thing is just that somewhere around that whole time, when things start getting really convoluted, they are driving in a car and someone is following them. And it's basically a character that is following them back through time. And I don't know who on earth it is. I think it's they mentioned the person by name. I thought it was the person they said earlier on was they were trying to, or they were hoping would lend them money or something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
That last part, I'm gonna have to go through and
Here,
yeah,
I can make it easier. Hold on.
yeah.
Like I can look
So
at it. So if you go to the prime, I on the trivia for primer, there is a spot that talked about it. Hold on, it's coming up right now. Here we go. The phrase here's a little tidbit. The phrase "time machine" is never stated in the entire movie. The time machine is always simply referred to as the box. It's interesting.
hmm
The character, it says, one of the pivotal moments in the film is when a character named Granger suddenly appears, having traveled back in time. Why Granger went back in time and was following Abe and Aaron is never explained.
Granger. Is it Rachel Granger or Thomas Granger? There's a few
I
Granger.
assume
Maybe
Thomas.
Thomas. Wasn't Thomas the one that they're trying to? He was trying to do something to.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think maybe that's one of the issues of the movie to some degree is that because it's so high on the jargon that they talk, it's a lot of under the lip talking, just a lot of mumbling that you could miss some of these points.
Yeah.
Of like, who's this Granger, and like now he's following them, and maybe they were trying to do something to him, but maybe he discovered something, or maybe Abe recruited him or something because he was trying to stop Aaron because it was concerned about him. It's never those things are not very clear. But maybe that's a question. Is there a value to that? Is there a value? I guess like what is the value to movies that are so confusing that, yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you went and rewatched it a third and fourth and fifth time, eventually you'll get all the pieces probably, but is it problematic that that you don't get these things, and they might be important to understanding what's going on in the movie, especially in the end?
I think it depends on the movie. I think there's definitely been some movies out there that don't bother explaining some stuff. And sometimes you can pull it off and it's like the movies are better off for it. Other times it's just sort of a neutral thing, and so other times it kind of completely ruins the movie.
Yeah.
I don't think this movie is ruined by it. I just think it's, it is a little convoluted.
Yeah, I mean, I've struggled with it myself when I try to make movies. Like you don't want to be too obvious, but then if you're too vague, then people might miss the point. So you need to have something else for them to grab onto. I think good examples of some of the Kubrick films, like a movie like The Shining, and there's other ones where there's so much in that movie. That's why there's documentaries made about it, and like you can analyze it to death. Um, but if you're just watching it on the surface, it's captivating stuff. It's suspenseful. You know what's going on. There's an alcoholic dad, and he's eventually like, loses his mind, cabin fever, wants to kill his family. It's all the drama is there. But if you want to dig deeper, you can go under the surface and find all these like little trinkets of like what's the meaning of all this and why this and why that. But you don't have to in order to enjoy the movie. So that's what and maybe this movie also succeeds on that level, that like, oh, this is mind bending and I'm sort of understanding what's going on and it's all very cool stuff, and I'm enjoying it, but I'm not getting all of this, but that's okay.
It's
Yeah.
hard to say.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel I obviously less so for this movie than a movie like The Shining and other ones, but yeah, I mean it's I don't know what are other examples of movies that are just super complex, but for some reason they're compelling by their complexity. I don't know.
I don't think that this is an example of a movie that's super complex, but uh, I think the movie Donnie Darko is outstanding, and it doesn't even try to explain its paradox.
Yeah, that's a good
It
one.
just presents you with a paradox, and by the end of the movie, you're just like, yeah, nice. you know,
That's probably a more successful attempt at that. Yeah, that movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's just captivating stuff. It just for some strange reason it works.
it's the best David Lynch movie that David Lynch had nothing to do with.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's a director that couldn't make a second good movie. It's just one of those things. Like you kind of like have you strike genius and with some concept or some approach to making a movie, and you just cannot duplicate it to save your life.
Um, well, the other aspect I wanted to get your guys' opinion on, well, not even opinion because I don't have the information, but I guess I just wanted to throw out there. Um, I was looking for this. I'd be curious to find out about this regarding Primer and several of these others as well. And I couldn't find it with a simple Google search. But I've been told that a good example of this is El Mariachi. El Mariachi cost $7,000 to make and to film. I believe he filmed it on 16 millimeter, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Thank you. But in both cases of El Mariachi and Clerks, the story I've been told is that though what's listed on IMDb is their budget for initially making the movie, 7,000 for El Mariachi, 27,000 for Clerks. But I'm pretty sure that after they screened at Sundance, I'm pretty sure that once Miramax picked them up, a ton of money was dumped into them. Now, when I say ton, I don't mean millions. I don't mean like a budget of a movie, of a bigger budget movie or anything like that. But like Clerks didn't have any of the music that it eventually had. They paid a ton of money to get music rights for its soundtrack, which does a really good job of making the movie feel like a movie. And El Mariachi, from what I remember, at least I was just reading this, and I wish I could find the article because I lost it. I was the tab that I was on, but I think when they first screened it, they were screening it on like a video or something, but like they I think they had to pay a lot of money in post production to get that thing to the point where they could show it like in theaters, to get to be more presentable. Um, I'd be very curious to know what if there was a more than $7,000 spent on Primer by the time they were showed it to people and got some funding to really put it out there, to clean it up a bit and make it look nicer,
It doesn't seem like it for sure. It doesn't seem like more money was put into it,
Well,
like
yeah, I
some of the other
know.
ones.
Yeah.
The director actually served as his own composer on the
Yeah,
movie.
I saw in the trailer or in the credits, I mean, that he did a lot. He had a lot of hats.
Yeah. I mean, surprisingly, I think I heard a anecdote about like Memento, that apparently when Memento, even though it was like a $5 million budget, they said that initially that movie was a huge mess after principal photography, and also the sound was just complete shit, and they had to go in and like do a lot of work to fix it up and make it look more like sound more polished and look more polished, and but it all somehow miraculously came together. So so yeah, I guess a lot of work is done into these movies to get them to be ready. But yeah, but Primer doesn't seem like that, and it's okay. I mean, I don't think it suits the story as well as some of these other movies that are done ultra low budget, like say Tangerine and some of these other ones that stand out, which I haven't seen most of those, but it seems like yeah, the plot of this one I really feel would have benefited from a solid film crew. Even if you do it like for 100,000 or like 200,000, like you still make it cheaply, but shoot it for the most part properly. I feel like it would have benefited. But it is what it is, and it's admirable that they got it done. And these movies are often just made as almost a calling card of sorts to to get a career going. No, nobody ideally, under most circumstances, nobody would choose to make this movie look the way that it looks. This is the point I'm
Yeah,
making.
that's a good point.
I mean, same thing with The Following. Maybe Pi would be an example, and Clerks. I think you kind of notice how the ones that are like in the tens of thousands, like the 60, 70,000, those are fairly close. Like you would pretty much shoot them the way that they were shot. You wouldn't really, if you had $2 more million, you wouldn't necessarily change the approach of shooting. Um, but but yeah, Following I think is unique. Following I think is the only movie where I feel like, yeah, it would be like a 35 millimeter camera and it would be in color, maybe, possibly, I'm not sure. But the angles and stuff and handheld, like you might have done all that stuff the same if you had more money.
Yeah, I
Uh,
kind of feel you might be right on that. What's
yeah,
the Gil? I think you were the one that was telling us because I was very surprised to hear this, but I remember when we all sat down and watched once, you were saying that like I was mentioning something about how like it's such a little indie movie or something, and you were saying that I think you said something like that you heard that they actually got offered more money and that the guy made it cheaper than he needed to or something like that.
yeah, that's a good point. Because I actually just
Mm.
saw a bunch of stuff about once because they're going on a tour and stuff. The two leads of that movie, they're
Really?
reuniting for like a
Nice.
tour. Um,
That's cool.
but yeah, because I guess it was released. It was like 2007 or something. I don't know what it was, but it was
It
like
does say 2007. Yeah.
some sort of anniversary of sorts. But in any case, um, yeah, like so there was a story that because I think it was made for 100,000 or something, that movie,
It says
and
150 on IMDb.
150. Yeah, I think they offer him like something between like 1 to 5 million, like that they wanted to make it like a more legit movie. But I don't know if it's the fact that he didn't want to have the pressure. Like maybe it's the pressure thing, and he felt that it would be more suitable for the movie to be done cheaply, like it would suit the story. and he would be able to do things in a way that he wouldn't be able to do with the whole film crew and stuff, like grabbing all these guerrilla style scenes on buses and whatnot. And it's one of those instances. It is a rare movie where it really works. Like you wouldn't want it to be done differently. Like it's the vibe that it's going for.
Yeah, I agree that it works for that movie, and I think the amazing thing about the story is that I don't think you'll ever really hear that ever again. You know, the idea of somebody who's got a script and they get the green light and they're offered X amount, and then they're like, "No, I don't need that much. Give me a tenth of that." You know?
Yeah, I can see that as pressure. Like, let's say if it was, I don't know if it was his first movie, it might have been. Maybe you don't want to jump in and do a $5 million movie. Maybe you want to just make something cheap that even if you make $0 on it, you're in the green. Like, nobody would really care. But if you take 5 million and the movie only makes 1 million, then yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just for information purposes, according to this, worldwide, it made almost just shy of 21 million.
Yeah, I mean,
But
so
it's funny
just
what you
not
just
a
said.
ton.
The this author that I was listening to a podcast recently where this author was talking about he was saying that he had written he's a very successful author. He's got a whole series of books, and I guess he's also written for Tom Clancy back before he died or something. But I guess he was saying that he had gotten a little bit of success, and then all of a sudden he was asked to do some of those books. And what he was expressing was that he was like, wow, I suddenly went from this to now I'm working on a project of this magnitude. And he said, I was glad and I was grateful. But at the same time, he's like, I was like, can't I just kind of ease my way into this? Do I have to just jump right to this level of success? But I can imagine how that would be rough. It could be stressful.
Yeah, and I might be
Yeah.
exaggerating. It might have been only 1 million, not 5 million, but
It's
that
still
might
10
be.
times as much.
It's just more than 150 for sure. Like that would have been like you basically shoot it on film, or like you have a whole film crew. Like he basically took like a camcorder and like a skeleton crew and just made a movie, as opposed to just making it legitimately. You know, so it's just it's an approach that's interesting. Like, and it's tough. It's tough to find like a movie that suits that. Like that. Me personally, I can't see myself. Like I'm thinking of, like, I've always like, could I come up with another feature idea but better than my first one, where like it would actually lend itself to be done very cheaply, and it wouldn't be uh, a negative thing to it, like against it. But yeah, I guess going back to Primer, they really were like on the hair. Like they were like this close to just and having it be completely just not believable and not work and not. But they really, that's why we were talking about it, is because they just like passed, like they just like they could have easily fallen into the category of like so many indie movies that are just, oh, this is just nonsense, amateur bullshit, and there's no value to it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the next movie that I'm planning on shooting it's going to be 20 minutes, and I'm probably going to have to spend more money on that 20 minutes than the guys on Primer spent on their 80 minutes.
Yeah, I mean that's often the
Yeah,
case. I mean, some of these shorts cost anywhere from like $10,000 to $50,000. People that make shorts, yeah,
yeah,
it's yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the reset was 10 to 11,000. Yeah.
Yeah, and we shot that on Soviet lenses.
Well, and that's what was probably most movie-looking movie that I've ever made because I spend that much money on it. So we got like the right locations, the right camera, and yeah.
And so many of the right locations were our living room.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about like
But
the other
yeah,
location we got that gave it a bit more scope
yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff.
I know, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It was a nice house.
Yeah, it was a nice house. We didn't shoot it all in shitty apartments like most of our short films and stuff. We got a location. We also were actually able to get a shot on the street, and it rained, so we got a natural wet down look for the ending. So yeah, we got lucky with some of the production value on that. But yeah, generally it's very tough to get good production value. So these movies really, you're really playing with fire. Like you could easily spend months, years of your life developing these things, and then you sit down and you watch, and it's like, this doesn't work. It's just like
Yeah.
it just doesn't fly. Again, like it happened to me with my feature. I feel like it was too complicated. It was like something that should have been done for 5 to 10 million, and I was doing it for like, back then I did it. The feature I think was like 10,000 or so. So it was just not suitable for the story, not suitable for the settings. Like you really need to find a way to make it work. And
I don't know
Yeah.
if people who have never worked on a film set or have never made their own thing understand just the feeling, but so often talking about this sort of stuff, it's like my brain just clicks over to this scene from the movie Super 8, when those kids are filming, and it's I don't know if other people think it's as funny as I do, or I assume we do. I don't know, but like I remember watching that movie and laughing out loud when they're filming this little chubby kid's dream project, his little short zombie short film that they're making, and they're preparing to film a scene, and there's this little train station, and that never has a train go by, and all of a sudden in the middle of the night when they're doing this guerrilla style, they see way off in the distance that a train is coming just in minutes, and the kid just starts screaming, production value. Ah! It's like so excited.
Yeah.
yeah, no, it is interesting. I guess that we did discuss this movie because of the I guess our history of attempting to make movies in the past or possibly in the future is yeah, it's that believability and production value that you try to get into a movie to make it just feel like a movie. There's a thing like you could shoot a video and it's either going to look like it's just a bunch of idiots with a camera trying to make a movie, or it's going to just be a movie. Like, and it can go either way when you're in those low budget amateurish level. It could really go either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely give them credit for that. I rated it more than I rated some other movies that we had on the podcast, which were much more expensive. So